So now we are starting to get into the appendicular vessels. So this includes the vessels of the arm and the leg. As you can see here, we have an arm. It is the left arm. So to start off, this is the upper arm, and we have the clavicle right here. So once a blood vessel passes by the clavicle, it then becomes known as the axillary artery. And then as it enters the brachial region, it becomes the brachial artery. And then it'll split into the radial artery and the ulnar artery, which we'll see in a second with the lower arm. This right here is the lower arm. So again, we have that brachial artery. It then splits into the radial artery, which will travel along the radial bone, so on the thumb side. And then we have the ulnar artery, which will travel against the ulnar. And you actually can't really see it, it disappears, but it'll stay on the pinky side. And we get to see it reemerge right here. And those come together to form the palmar arch, so the blood supply is seen in the palm of the hand. All right, and now this is the model of the vessels of the arm. We commonly call this the claw, and I'm hoping that this video won't be painful for you, so let's get started. We're going to focus on the arteries right now. So this first one is our axillary artery, but then when it gets into the brachial region, it is our brachial artery, and it'll continue all the way down to the cubital region, at which point it'll split into the ulnar artery, which will run alongside the ulna, and the radial artery, which will run alongside the radius. All right, so now let's look at the veins of the claw. So we'll start with those deep ones because they're easier to point out. And that includes our axillary vein, which then becomes our brachial vein, which at the crook of the elbow will split into our radial vein. It's deep inside there running alongside the radius. And then our ulnar vein running alongside the ulnar. So if we step back, now let's look at those superficial veins. Off of the brachial vein will be this basilic vein. It'll run all the way down. It'll hook into 17 that you see here. And again, it goes the entire length of the arm. On the other side, we have the cephalic vein. It does the same exact thing, except on the other side. It'll be on the radial side. And then to meet in between them will be the median antecubital vein, found right here. And off of the basilic vein will be this other vein called the median antebrachial vein, as seen by 16 right here. Okay, so you just got done looking at the video of the claw and you're probably feeling a little bit overwhelmed with those arm veins. That's totally fine. Arm veins tend to be overwhelming. So I'm going to show you something I typically show my students. And this is a way of representing the veins. So what we're going to do first is we are going to draw the deep veins. Remember, deep veins always share a name with an artery. So that's going to be our axillary, brachial, radial, and ulnar. And I do apologize for the drawing. I'm not an artist, I'm a scientist, so just ignore my hand arm. All right, so we're going to start off with our axillary. It then turns into our brachial. Around the elbow, we'll split into our radial and our ulnar veins. And now we're going to do our superficial. So our cephalic vein will travel all the way from the top of the arm down the radial side. Our basilic vein will travel all the way from the top of the arm to the ulnar side. Around the elbow, they'll meet in the middle to form the median antecubital. And then off of the basilic, we get this median antebrachial vein. Another helpful hint for remembering cephalic versus basilic is if this person were to raise their arm up, the cephalic vein would be to the ceiling, and the downside of their arm would be the basilic vein to the basement. here is a labeled version, so you can just linger on that for a second before moving on. So this is a video of the vasculature of the leg, and what we're seeing up here is the top part of the leg. This is the left leg, so don't forget to be including your left and right where they are needed. So what we see here is this big red vessel, and that's called our femoral artery, and it's paired with this blue vessel, which is our femoral vein. And this femoral artery will actually run down, and it'll go to the medial side, wrap around the leg, and pop out on the back into the popliteal region to form the popliteal artery. And now we're going to visit the lower part of the leg. So, going back to this popliteal region, we have our popliteal artery and our popliteal vein. At this point, the vein disappears, so we'll just be focusing on the artery. So our popliteal artery continues down and becomes our posterior tibial artery. Its first branch is this anterior tibial artery that'll actually go in between the tibia and fibula and pop out on the anterior side, hence it being called the anterior tibial artery. But if we go back to that posterior tibial artery, it has a second branch called the fibular artery, which will stay on the posterior side along here, we just don't see it. And then it continues all the way down again as the posterior tibial artery until it forms into the arches found in the foot.